So in my last Mother of Threat narrative, Dialogs with Della Burton, I went into how an identity crisis that boys go through leave them vulnerable to becoming snapped up by a threat narrative. And now I wanted to look at the situation with girls. Now, when the boy is having this identity crisis and he's saying to himself, not saying to himself, but on a subconscious level, here is the mother goddess. What am I? I am inferior to this emotional potency that's been laid down in my subconscious. The girl, at the same time, and we're just talking about a boy and a girl with only the mother, the girl is experiencing an opposite situation that is just as toxic. What she realizes when she realizes that she is the same as this mother goddess, and she comes to the realization that who she is as a separate person, separate from the mother goddess, will never be more important than being female. Do you get what I'm saying there?
Yeah. Life becomes all about being female.
Yes.
And rather than just being.
Yeah, it becomes that becomes all encompassing. Her only real effective self is being female. That's it. Her personhood will never be more important than her womanhood. And unless there is a father there to balance that out, that's going to constrain and limit her throughout her entire life. So what you'll end up seeing is these girls who are just raised by mothers, they're going to be constrained and limited to just being female. So what are they going to do immediately, as soon as possible? They're going to start engaging in the most female acts that they can. So why are they giving birth at 11, 12, or hell, even 9? Because they're entirely constrained and by being female. That's all they are, is female.
It also would lead to using the same kind of toxic feminine traits, or displaying the same kind of toxic feminine traits in sort of establishing a group, establishing their own community. Mm-hmm. Within, their group of peers. They couldn't establish, say, a pecking order, or, for something a little nicer, just who is who within the group, mm-hmm. without competing with each other for who is the most feminine, who's the most female, and who's the most stereotypically female, mm-hmm. Based on the societal view of what female is.
Well, when you're constrained, when your identity is entirely defined in being female, then the only way that you have sort of an effective presence or a sense of self or any idea of affecting your environment is through your femaleness, which means you're either emphasizing your value or you're emphasizing your vulnerability. And when you have women in a group who are all thinking the same way, that, it's like it sets women, this whole situation sets them at odds. And right. Somebody is going to end up looking or seeming more feminine or more whatever, more vulnerable, more beautiful than someone else.
And it kind of eliminates almost the entire gamut of human capability.
Well, it sets a girl's personhood at odds with her womanhood. If she's defined by her vulnerability, the more that she has an effective presence in the world, the more that she takes her identity from her agency and thus has an ability to affect her surroundings, the less vulnerable she is, the less of a woman she is. And if she's been taught through this whole process that womanhood is this incredibly powerful emotional force, she's always going to defer to her womanhood over her personhood.
Well, this explains a lot about what I suffered in high school. So my whole identity as a person was built on not so much what I could achieve, but how I could figure myself out and be the best of what I could be, not just being female, but when I went to my class reunion, my last class reunion that I went to, I took my camera so everybody would be sure to recognize me, because I wasn't sure they'd know who I was without it. I was, involved in sports. I was involved in all kinds of different activities. It wasn't so much my seeking of approval within society, but my seeking of a place within my community that was my school was more in the things that I did, rather than I'm a girl, look at me. And of course, that pretty much put me on the margins of every group. And I was involved with every group in my school, every single clique. I can't really name a clique in my school that I didn't do something with. But I was on the edges of every single one of them. Yeah. And yeah, it was that very thing. The other girls were competing. A lot of the other girls were competing for who could be the girliest. Who could be, who could be the most female.
Who could be the most beautiful.
Who could be the most beautiful, who could be the most vulnerable.
But who could be...
And it wasn't entirely that way. I mean, we had athletes that competed for who could be the best at what they did. But a lot of that competition was in, look how I have to struggle for this.
So it was an emphasis on the vulnerability.
But we also, you could look at the difference between a lot of the students. See, I grew up in a small town. There were a lot of students whose families were more like the old-fashioned, the family business maybe wasn't in the home, but the whole family was involved in it. And sometimes the family business was a farm. And so both parents were at home. And some of our best athletes, some of our highest achieving girls in the school really came from families like that. Not the family that is the modern, mom and dad both go to work someplace and the kid has a babysitter after, has some sort of daycare after school. But where both parents were intimately involved with the child rearing and the guidance that the child received.
Well, I'm not surprised, but the thing is that what I wanted to point out is that in these different cliques, women will compete to be the most beautiful in the context of beauty for that clique.
Yes. And there was something very different with that too. I mean, and my school didn't have necessarily distinct lines between the cliques, but for instance, you had the preppies. You had to have penny loafers. If you didn't have penny loafers, you weren't dressed like a preppy. If you were a skater, you had to have skids, or you weren't dressed like a skater. I think I had mentioned that on Honey Badger Radio, the way each clique had almost a uniform.
Yeah, actually, you mentioned it in the previous episode of the Dialogs. But yeah, it's like they establish these little territories, and then they compete within the territory for the one who most embodies the beauty of that particular subgroup.
Yeah,
and it's interesting how that all forms, and I think so. I think that actually, just to get back into what I was saying before, I think that it really does affect girls. It limits them when they don't have a male caretaker, because if they did have a male caretaker, if they did have a father in their lives who had established that emotional connection between masculinity and that potent emotional masculinity is what maybe I should refer to it. Essentially, the connection between provision of the girl's needs, early needs, and the adult masculinity. That potent emotional connection. If a girl has that, then when she recognizes that she's female, there's still this antipode that there is a mystery, a sense that there's something outside of the mother goddess. So it opens up the girl emotionally to the idea of achievement, that there's something more out there, that there's a mystery to be solved or explored or conquered or understood or whatever else, that there's movement. and possibility, as opposed to shutting that part of her down and saying, you will always be more defined by being female than being a person.
I don't know. It's hard to, it's kind of hard to articulate that one, but I guess part of what would be necessary for a girl to understand that, that achievement is part of being, not just part of being a girl, but just part of being. And that being female doesn't limit her from that. Mm-hmm. Is that she'd have to also see the interaction between her parents.
Yeah.
She wouldn't just have to see her father achieve. She'd have to see her mother support that. She'd have to see her mother achieve and her father support that. A father that's, I guess, present all the time or present on a large scale. A dad that she's close to. There is that aspect of, I don't have to just be just like mom. Mm-hmm. I don't have to grow up and epitomize the mother goddess. I also can take my lessons from, this other that I can't be. I can't be dad, but I can take my lessons from dad. And I guess I can even say that I kind of did that in a way as well. This photography was something that I really picked up from my dad. Mm-hmm. The whole family did, really. And it was his passion first, and I was the one out of the whole family. I was the one that picked it up and ran with it. Not my mom, not my brother. They both got involved with it, and they both enjoy it. But I guess that was kind of my way of, I couldn't be like dad, as I'm not a guy, but I could do some of the things that he did. Mm-hmm. And I could, the things that I can learn from him, that I could be like dad in ways that allow me to adopt things that I admire about dad. Mm-hmm. It's something that I would not have picked up on if he hadn't been there. And I was limited to, the epitome of my being is to be female. I can only be like mom.
Mm-hmm. If you have a situation where you have a girl, and a mother and a father, when she realizes that she is the same, that she has the same identity as this very potent force in her life, which has been the mother, who's pretty much defined everything, that emotionally potent womanhood. At the same time, as if there's a strong relationship between the two, the man and the woman, there's the sense that the man is somehow involved in how the mother became mother. Of course he is, right? Mm-hmm. And that actually introduces the mystery of it. The sense of, well, I am not mother as I am. I am still a child. Something about the relationship between the two, my mother has achieved something in order to become a mother. And that achievement is, of course, a relationship with the man. So it introduces the idea of achieving personal value through your actions rather than something you were just born with. And it's not just limited to achieving a mate, but there's a sense that to become a mother goddess, that you actually have to achieve something. You actually have to focus on some aspect of your personhood, of your personal achievement in order to get it. It's not just something that's given to you.
You're not just there by virtue of being female.
Yeah. You have to achieve a relationship with an adult male. And there's that sort of dim awareness in girls, so that it frees them from just being defined by being female when they realize that there is an aspect of achievement involved in becoming a woman, becoming a mother. There's an aspect of personal achievement. It's not just something that's handed to you. Of course, it is sort of handed to you in this society now.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate, but I guess the only way that you're going to change that is to get guys to be a little bit more respectful of their own sexuality.
They have to value it more than they value getting attention from a potential partner.
Yeah. So it makes it too easy. And by making themselves too easy, they attract women who are very contemptuous, I think.
Yeah.
Who don't see themselves in terms of their personhood, but see themselves totally in terms of being female, of ruling the belonging of the society, and of men being, that's the way they see themselves. They see themselves as being defined as being female, and women who see themselves as being defined as being female really buy into the threat narrative. This idea that they embody the sense of belonging of a culture, and men exist to serve their benefit. So instead of being a woman who sees her value, both in terms, like, not like a human value, like we have value just for being, but
Right.
also we earn value through our actions. And a woman who sees that, just having a guy who just, who doesn't value himself, who isn't difficult, might not be something that they want. I don't know where I'm going with that.
It wouldn't be a goal. It wouldn't be. I do get what you're saying there. Where a girl whose entire identity is wrapped up in being female and in feeling herself to be the arbiter of who belongs and who doesn't, she would just feel like the guy owes her the attention. He owes her, basically kowtowing to her. Anything that she wants, anything that she feels is appropriate to prove his right to belong. Whereas the girl whose sense of self isn't tied up in being female and who maybe doesn't feel so much like the arbiter of who belongs and who doesn't, as she does just feels like she's a person among other people, wouldn't necessarily have that sense of entitlement to being, to a certain level of treatment, to being treated as something special and different and owed. Whereas the girl whose sense of self isn't tied up in being female and who maybe doesn't feel so much like the arbiter of who belongs and who doesn't, as she does just feels like she's a person among other people, wouldn't necessarily have that sense of entitlement to being, to a certain level of treatment, to being treated as something special and different and owed. And so it would be kind of alien to her if a guy comes along and doesn't value himself and acts like he has to prove to her that he has the right to belong. It would be outside of her understanding.
It would be sort of outside of her understanding, and maybe a bit off-putting, I think.
Yeah.
Because the thing is that such a woman who defines herself not just by her existence as a woman, but also by what she's achieved, would want to have something to achieve in her relationship. So there would want to be a sense that it isn't just given for free, that she has to pass, like a relationship, that you earn trust, that
right.
you demonstrate caring, that you court each other, essentially.
Both sides have to earn from the other what the
intimacy.
The girl who feels more entitled thinks just that the guy has to earn from her.
Yeah, exactly. So it's more of a mutual thing. This idea that a man would be actually reserving himself until she's actually, proven herself, right? As opposed to just throwing himself at her. I think that sort of ties into it, and it would be a very different way of relating than I think is happening now.
Right. In fact, I think women who do have femininity or being female as their center of being, and who sort of grow up with that idea that they are the arbiters of who belongs and who doesn't, and have the right to expect others to earn the right to belong with them, they would probably take it as an affront if they come across a more independent guy who doesn't play into that.
Who doesn't think that they automatically deserve his attention, his sexuality, a relationship, just because they want it,
right?
Essentially, and it's definitely a more equal relationship. But the reality is that it's so limiting to define yourself primarily by being female, and to define yourself primarily by either your vulnerability or your attractiveness, and to have nothing else like that. That is who you are. You are someone who embodies the belonging of a society. You are someone who is the center of a threat narrative. You are someone whose vulnerabilities need to be served by those who submit to threat narratives. But that in itself is very limiting, because you don't ever get a sense of yourself as being an independent being, because you are reliant on getting your needs met through this system. You never get a sense that your actions have consequences in the same way as other people's, like men's do. Which means, like, if you can't be punished, then you can't be, like, doing a good deed is diminished. Like, if you can't be punished for doing a bad deed, then doing a good deed is diminished.
And you can't be rewarded either.
No, it's like, everything is sort of becomes limited to being female, essentially. And I don't see this relationship between men and women as being particularly masculine and feminine. Again, it's seen multiple times throughout history in different groups of people, and you can establish this. I would love to see experiments in establishing this just between randomly choosing groups of people, and how we can set up some groups that control the belonging, and other groups that serve the benefit of those who control the belonging, and you will see the same behaviors that we code as masculine and feminine coming out of that.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with male or female. It doesn't have nothing to do with masculine or feminine. It just has to do with this social construct of who embodies the belonging of a group and who serves the people who embody the belonging of the group, who have to earn belonging. And it just comes out of that.
I guess there's one thing I can say, because this is mainly to differentiate between what you're saying and what feminists say, where feminists talk about women's identities being wrapped up in their physical appearance and meeting a certain societal standard and looking a certain way, but they treat it as an externally forced situation, as if, like, society pushes this on women. And they treat it as though women and girls have this mentality of their femaleness being the epitome of their existence, and their prettiness being the epitome of their existence, based on what we see in media and what we see magazines, that are created for women, how we're portrayed on TV, what the societal standard is. I think from what you're talking about, it's more the other way around. It's something that women create within themselves in response to their life experiences, not so much media and what society pushes on women, but their earliest experiences with their mothers and without their fathers, or with the way the dynamics of their household is, where their fathers have to go to work outside the home and aren't necessarily as involved in the child raising.
Yeah. It's not a situation that patriarchy is forcing it on women. And it's sort of ridiculous to say that. The reality is that as you grow up, as you become adult, you become more resistant to these emotional manipulations. If you want to find out why a whole bunch of people are engaging in the same behavior, you look at their childhood. You look at how they were raised as children. And I think, that it really does come out of these situations that women experience in childhood. And again, it's not anybody to blame. It's just sort of something that we fall into very easily.
Yeah.
Just because of the particular frailties of having one person raise, or one gender raise the children. I think that this could have happened if it was reversed. If it was men raising the children, it may have been able to go the other way, to a certain extent. I don't know how much, but because of breastfeeding. But so it's just this situation that it happened to happen this way, and And the reality is, if we want to change it, I don't think we can change it by getting angry. We can just change it by recognizing who has responsibility for what. No blame, just this is what you can change if you want to change this dynamic, and this is what you can change if you want to change this dynamic. Let's get to it. And the other thing I wanted to say is that feminists, when they propose it, that this whole situation is the result of women being the victims of patriarchy, they're actually buying into exactly the same dynamic. This idea that women are victims. Well, first of all, the idea that women are victims has an implicit assumption that women are valuable. Because the only people who are victims are people who are valuable. People who aren't valuable, who have to earn their value, aren't victims, aren't allowed to be victims.
Right.
Because they don't have any value. If you don't have any value, you can't have any vulnerability. Because it's just like, what's vulnerable? No value, no vulnerability, nothing to lose, right?
Right.
So they're buying into this idea that women have some sort of value that men don't. And that men do things to women and women just have things done to them, which is exactly the same dynamic. It's that women are these passive entities that have no real, that they're defined by their femaleness and not defined by their actions. Because they don't take any actions. They're just acting on by the patriarchy.
And so by framing it the way they frame it, not only are feminists not getting it and not understanding how this happens or what the cause is or how it could be, combated or dealt with.
Yeah.
They're also demonstrating it.
Yeah, they're essentially buying into it. They're trying to change the dynamic by encouraging it.
Yep.
It's not going to work, and it never will work. You have to challenge it intelligently, and do it in a way that don't piss people off. It's just like if you want to change this, change it. It's not really feminine. It's not really masculine. You can see it multiple times throughout history. The behavior of people who embody threat narratives, they engage in these behaviors. The people who are in service to the people who embody threat narratives, they engage in these behaviors. And we've happened to call them masculine and feminine because of these particular potholes that we have as boys and girls psychologically throughout our childhood. And yeah, ultimately, I think feminism has definitely gone wrong. They're trying to change the behavior by encouraging it, more of it, and it just won't work. So I think maybe that's where to end off. But for me, I think there's a lot more to talk about, but I'll see how people respond to this.
Okay.
And what their questions are, and if they understand it, or if they get really offended, or what happens. So anyway, I'll just call it a day.
Sounds good.
This has been Dialogs with Typhon Blue and Della Burton.